Hello there, you don't need me to tell you it's been a very windy few days across the UK. In fact, we'll start this week's video by looking back at Storm Ciara as named by the UK Met Office. This affected the UK on Sunday, of course. Big area of low pressure, the centre of it stayed just to the north of Scotland, but on the southern flank a lot of isobars, a lot of strong winds. These were the maximum gusts recorded from all of our weather stations across the UK during the 24 hours on Sunday, and you can see quite widely gusts inland in the high 50s, low 60s, some places over 70, and around the coast, that's where the red colours are showing up here. The peak gust here 93 miles an hour along the west coast of Wales, but we had some fairly strong gusts quite far inland as well, and that came courtesy of this squall line on the cold front. So this here marks the cold front, if you like. Ahead of it, very mild conditions, 14 degrees despite all the wind and rain. Behind the front, temperatures drop back down to 7 degrees. So quite a marked temperature drop. And that's courtesy of this squall line. You can see these bright echoes here. That's where the rain was torrential in places. We've had some thunder and lightning with this on Sunday as well. That's what these orange circles are here. They're clusters of lightning strikes. And as this came through, it produced some very gusty winds along with torrential rain in places too. Most active across the southern parts of northern England, into the East Midlands, and then diving down into parts of North Cambridgeshire, into Norfolk as well. Now we did see gusts over Lincolnshire getting into the high 70s, 77 and 78 miles an hour, even into the low 70s across West Norfolk, causing some damage. And earlier on across the Manchester area, we actually saw a gust of 86 miles an hour at the airport as this squall line went through as well. So some damaging gusts of wind in places from that feature alone. This map here shows the gusts that we recorded on Sunday, on the 24 hours that make up Sunday, compared to the previous record set at these weather stations all around the UK. So it's relative to the area that they were recorded in. And what you can clearly see here, this big cluster over the East Midlands into East Anglia, where these bright colours mean you have to go back a lot of years to find a gust of similar strength or more as we saw on Sunday. So for this station here, for example, you have to go back 20 years to find a gust of similar strength, and indeed that extends, as I say, into parts of East Anglia, 13 years or so at Marham in Norfolk, taking us back to 2007, of course, Storm Ciara in January 2007. A couple of stations down here, Cardinham in Cornwall, 20 years you have to go back to find a gust of similar strength. That was courtesy of a very lively shower that went through, but notice most of the other stations in the area 0-1 years or so. So they've had winds of equal strength fairly recently, actually. And another station down here, this is Hurstmonceux in East Sussex, also 20 years you had to go back. You'll notice across the northern half of the UK, not much colour showing at all, meaning the winds we saw on Sunday, fairly normal for this part of the world, nothing too out of the ordinary. Further south, it's generally 2 or 3 years you have to go back to find wind gusts that strong. But the main thing with Storm Ciara was not necessarily the peak gusts, but the duration of the strong winds and also how widespread they were across the UK. So this graph here, quite a long graph as you can see, is showing the percent number of weather stations in the UK that have recorded a gale in each calendar day, every day, all the way back, as you can see here, down to 2014. Now Storm Ciara, that's all the way over here on the right hand side. I've highlighted it here with a red circle. Nearly or just over 40% of the weather stations in the UK recorded a gale on Sunday at some point during the day. And you have to go all the way back to this event here in January 2015 to find a day where an equal number or higher of the weather stations recorded a gale. In other words, we've had the most widespread gales for over 5 years across the UK. So it was quite a notable event, even if the absolute peak gusts weren't particularly noteworthy in your part of the UK. And there's more stormy weather on the way as well. It's all courtesy of a very active jet stream. It was blowing over 260 miles an hour at the end of last week. Still very active over us right now, hence it's still windy outside, but it is going to weaken a touch, just a little bit, over the next few days. You can see it weakening here, not much. And actually, as we head towards the weekend, another surge of cold air over the US will develop yet another powerful part of the jet stream, which will drive areas of low pressure towards us this weekend as well. So we're not done with the stormy weather yet. Still more of that to come as we head later on this week, and more especially into the weekend as well. For the time being, let's take it day by day. We're starting off Wednesday here. Slight ridging, you'll notice, developing across the western side of the UK. This will track its way east through the day. What that means is that it will tend to kill off a lot of the showers. Still quite a few affecting the north and the west of the UK. We've had plenty of snow showers here lately. These will continue into Wednesday, but they will become more isolated with time. Southern areas having a mostly dry day, still breezy, but not as windy as it has been. But here comes our next area of low pressure, and that will be driven in as we go through Wednesday night into Thursday. So a spell of heavy rain, some strong winds for a time with this as well. Some snow across the northern hills where this grazes that cold air on the northern edge. Now there's still a bit of uncertainty at the moment as to exactly how far north this rain might get, but you'll notice the northern half of Scotland is still in dry conditions because they actually stay to the north of this whole area of low pressure. And actually with the cold air in place, the snowfields and light winds on the northern side of this low, it could actually be a very cold night Wednesday night into Thursday morning. This is just an example of how low the temperatures could get, down into minus double figures, you'll notice, in some sheltered parts of Scotland as well. Further south, milder air coming in with that area of low pressure means it won't be quite so cold here, with temperatures eventually getting into double figures, notice, down towards the extreme southwest. So potentially a very cold night on Wednesday night into Thursday morning. So there's our area of low pressure on Thursday. That will quickly scoot out of the way. Some lively thundery showers across southern England for a time Thursday afternoon. And then through Thursday night, ridge building in. So quiet conditions for a time on Thursday night means perhaps a bit more of a widespread frost developing across the UK, but it's a short-lived ridge, doesn't last very long, because even by Friday morning, rain already out west will be pushing in from the Atlantic, and it does look then quite unsettled through Friday, but more especially on Saturday, deep area of low pressure spinning up to the northwest. This has been named StormDennis by the Met Office. A lot of rain in here, which is a flooding concern, of course. A lot of isobars as well, which means some strong winds as well. Probably not quite as strong as Storm Ciara, but obviously a lot of the trees have been weakened somewhat by the strong winds of late. So perhaps it doesn't take quite such strong winds to bring some further trees and branches down and cause some further disruption. So the potential there for some quite disruptive weather, whether it's from the wind or the rain, and flooding risk as we go into the weekend. A lot of the ground is still saturated following recent rain events, that sort of thing. So keeping an eye very closely on the detail of the forecast for the weekend. By the beginning of next week, the low will have cleared off to the northeast. We've got high pressure down across the Azores, where it normally is at this time of the year. We go back into a run of northwesterly winds. So for a time over the weekend, we'll turn very mild again, especially in the south because of the southwesterly winds ahead of that low. But then as the low clears away, back to the northwesterly as we go. Not as cold as it is right now, mind you, but still plenty of showers then driving into these western parts of the UK. There'll be, again, snow on the hills as well. So almost back to where we are right now, really, for the beginning of next week. Some signs of a change, though, by the middle of next week. That Azores high starts to build a little bit more over Western Europe and actually ridging more into at least southern parts of the UK. Now, there's a bit of uncertainty about how far north this could ridge, how much more amplified the pattern could get from midweek onwards, but reasonable signs at the moment that a ridge will build in at some time around sort of Wednesday next week, which should give more in the way of dry weather in the south. Now, with the high in this position, it's still going to be breezy. It's not going to be calm necessarily, but it just depends on how far north this high can build in as to whether we see more in the way of fog, and it will bring with it perhaps an increased risk of a little bit of frost where we get those clear skies. Still, though, quite breezy in the northwest, and here we got some showers, perhaps even some longer spells of rain waiting to come in here later on in the day. So this is the sort of trends we're starting to see now. Subtle shifts in the pattern, with the high pressure starting to shift gradually a little bit further north for the rest of the month, and that means the low pressures will be generally a bit further away to the northwest, and so the focus for wet weather will be in the northwest, and a better chance of some prolonged drier spells developing further southeast. Doesn't mean the odd front won't come through every now and again, but on balance, the end of the month we'll see more in the way of this high pressure building in and the rain more confined towards the northwest, which has been the theme really for a number of weeks now. Now, to show this in a little bit more detail, here's our ensemble plots for rainfall. This is what we call a box and whisker diagram, looking at the next 10 days or so. I've picked Western Scotland, Oban here, and Southeast England, Hastings, just to show you the two different types of regimes going on going forward in time. So what we see here then, these are the rainfall totals for each day. You can see the date going along here, along the bottom. What you find is we've got 50 different computer models that have been run, and these are the different outcomes all put together on one diagram. So where you get these boxes, that's the middle 50% of all of our possible solutions for rainfall on each day, and then the bars here indicate the highest and the lowest of all of our computer models. So there's a big range here, for example, and then this is the middle 50%. Now, where that middle 50% is very narrow, that's where we've got high confidence, and when it's very large, that's where confidence is much lower. So what you can see right now, for example, at Oban, plenty of showers coming in off the Atlantic, wintry showers as well. So, chances are there'll be some rain at some point from these frequent showers over the next couple of days. But notice by Thursday, a much drier signal here. Remember, Oban is on the northern side of that area of low pressure coming in, so a chance it could end up being a dry day, or at least if you do get some rain, probably not very much by the looks of things. Whereas compared to further south, Hastings has a much stronger signal for getting some wetter weather on Thursday from that area of low pressure. Then as we head towards the weekend, big spread starts to come in. So there's a lot of uncertainty about exactly how things will play out on Saturday and Sunday, but there is the potential, and that's all it is, that we could see some fairly significant rainfall totals showing up here in the southeast, but also across Scotland as well. So nowhere necessarily immune through the weekend from getting some significant rain, but more especially across the south and the west, where you're exposed to those onshore southwesterly winds. Then as we go into next week, notice how things become much drier across Hastings. A very strong signal here for Tuesday, Wednesday for hardly any rain. Yes, a couple of members are going for some, but the vast majority could take it down to 0 millimetres for Tuesday and Wednesday. But in Western Scotland, where I showed you earlier, still that flow off the Atlantic, still the potential here for some rain or showers coming in. So turning drier in the south, middle of next week, but still further rain or showers in the northwest continuing throughout. So quite a bit going on, and certainly at the moment with that mixture of rain, sleet, snow, hail, thunder, you name it, everything going on out there at the moment. Good idea to actually sign up to WQRadar. Here you can see all the different types of precipitation, so the radar can tell you where it's snowing, where it's raining, where there may be hail falling, and of course where lightning is occurring as well. So if you sign up here, you can get latest weather observations, temperature, wind speed, that sort of thing across the UK. If you're trying to do some spraying, it'll tell you the wind speeds outside right now. And you can get lightning alerts sent via text or email to you as well as an archive going back. So you can look back at weather in the past. Maybe you want to look back at the storm over the weekend and see how strong the winds were in your area. So as I say, you can sign up wqradar.co.uk. Now across Europe for week 2, so this is the 17th of February off towards the 23rd. There's that area of Azores high trying to build in further east with time, but still low pressure very much dominating for the northern half of the UK into Scandinavia. So still this westerly flow, and of course that's still going to bring in the mild air off the Atlantic. So again, as has been the case for most of the winter, well above average temperatures across much of Europe, nearer normal across the far west of the UK, but still above average in the southeast. And in terms of rainfall, of course, where you've got low pressure, that's where the rain, showers and snow is. So central northern Europe, including the UK, above average. Drier than normal though across the south, where we've got that high pressure building in. As I say, later on in the month, latter part of February, we are starting to see signs that high pressure will shift just a little bit further north. Now, it's not necessarily going to build in prolonged and give us lots of dry weather, but it does mean any areas of low pressure will become less frequent and there'll be more drier, longer drier spells developing, especially the further south you are. The further north you are, you're closer to low pressure. So here you're more likely to get some rain at times, more cloud, more breeze, that sort of thing. But it does mean perhaps an increased risk of frost and some fog patches for the latter part of February. Again, the flow coming around the top of that high means it's still above average across Eastern Europe. The signal for mild is weaker across Western Europe because here, if we get fog and frost, that could take a bit of a dent on the daytime temperatures if it's a bit slow to clear in places as well. So it's still slightly above average, but not as significantly above average as it will have been perhaps the week before. And you can see where things are drier than normal by the brown shading here, especially across southern Europe, but actually extending across more of Europe during this particular time frame. Not a great deal of change expected into the early part of March. Still that high pressure to the south, if anything extending more further east across Europe. Still though low pressures to the north, so we're keeping this sort of westerly flow going in general, sort of averaged out over the whole week. Perhaps a hint the high might be slightly weaker, which might allow a bit more in the way of Atlantic fronts to come in, that sort of thing. Temperatures though still above average across most of Europe, especially in the east. Again, further west the signal is for slightly above average, but there could be the odd day or two where we get actually below average temperatures because of frost and fog where it tends to linger. And in terms of rainfall, well, it's still below average in the southeast, but we are starting to see rainfall coming up above average across these more exposed northern and western parts. Just a hint that perhaps the high might be a little bit weaker as we go into the early part of March, but still very much dominating closer to the southeast of the UK. So there is a slight change in the pattern likely by the middle of next week. In the meantime though, further bouts of wet and windy weather expected through the rest of this week, especially by the weekend. Occasional frosts, especially the north where it will be there most nights. Further south it'll be the odd night here and there with a bit of frost. And there will be some snow over the hills in the north as well. And then generally becoming drier across southern parts, more settled here from around the middle of next week onwards, but not completely dry necessarily. Could be the odd weak front that comes through. And with that, we would see an increased risk of some fog and frost through the latter stages of February into early March. But still, the further northwest you are, there's still signs it will be wet at times here. So not necessarily a big old high building in across the whole of the UK, as perhaps some people would want at the moment after the recent wet and windy weather. So still pretty windy, still some further disruption likely later on this week, then perhaps things calming down just a touch towards the middle of next week onwards. As ever, you can keep up to date with the latest forecast by following us on social media.